The $500 million deal was minutes from being signed. Black Waitress exposed Arab billionaire CEO's trap. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. As Lena stood there, listening to the words that could destroy everything Elias Youssef had worked for, she felt a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't just a matter of overhearing an illegal transaction. This was her moment, a turning point that could either change the course of the night or leave her standing in the shadows forever. Her heart raced, but she kept her face calm, steady, as she finished pouring the wine and moved on to the next table, her mind spinning with the weight of the information she now held. The room around her felt like it was closing in, each step she took echoing louder than before. The deal that would change so many lives was now mere minutes from being signed. But Lena knew something the others didn't, something that could expose everything, and she wasn't about to let it slip away. She had spent too long in the shadows, observing and listening, to let this moment pass. But what was she supposed to do with this knowledge? She wasn't in a position to confront Elias Youssef directly. She was just a waitress. But she also knew the power of the truth. And the truth had a way of coming out, whether you wanted it to or not. Lena made her way back to the service station, her mind racing. The phone in her pocket buzzed. Her manager, Derek, asking for another round of drinks for table 6. She shoved the phone back into her pocket and grabbed the next tray of drinks. But her mind wasn't on the task at hand. It was on Elias. On the deal. On the trap that he was setting for everyone at that table. What would happen if someone exposed him now? What if she could be the one to do it? Her thoughts raced faster than she could process them. But one thing was clear. She needed help. She couldn't take down Elias Youssef on her own, no matter how much she wanted to. Lena needed a way to get this information into the right hands. But who could she trust? Her shift was nearing its end, but the weight of what she knew made it feel like the longest night of her life. She walked past Elias again, his back turned as he spoke to his lawyer. She caught a glimpse of his expression, completely unaware that his empire was about to crumble. But as she moved past him, her gaze flicked toward the door. The exit. She had an idea. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get her started. Lena slipped into the back office of the restaurant, where the security cameras were monitored. The small room was quiet, lit only by the soft glow of the screens. She quickly scanned the room, making sure no one was around. She could see the feeds from the main dining area, the fancy chandeliers, the elegant dinner tables. But her eyes locked onto one camera feed, the one that captured the back of the room, the hallway near the kitchen, the place where the employees came in and out. This was her chance. She grabbed the phone and dialed a number she'd never thought she'd use. The phone rang, once, twice, 3 times, before it was answered. Hello. The voice on the other end was familiar, but it wasn't someone Lena had spoken to in a long time. It's Lena. I need help. I've got something on Elias Youssef, and it's bad. Really bad. There was a brief pause before the voice responded, now more alert. What are you talking about? I overheard something. Something about a $500 million deal. He's laundering money through offshore accounts. I've got proof, but I don't know what to do with it. You have to help me. She felt the weight of the words as they left her mouth, but she couldn't take them back now. Where are you? The voice asked, urgency creeping into their tone. The Waitress lounge. I'm still here. I need someone who can get this to the right people. Lena's heart pounded. Just trust me. Get me out of here, and I'll explain everything. The person on the other end hesitated. For a moment, but then responded. Okay, I'm on my way. Don't do anything stupid. Keep your head down. Lena ended the call and took a deep breath, her nerves on edge. She had done all she could for now, but she knew Elias Youssef's world was about to come crashing down, and she was about to be the one to set it all in motion. I need to get out of here. Lena's heart pounded as she waited near the back office of Waitress lounge, her mind racing with what she had just set in motion. She glanced nervously at the clock on the wall. Her shift was almost over, but there was no way she was leaving yet. Not with the evidence she had, and not with Elias Youssef still sitting in the dining room, completely unaware that his empire was about to crumble. The phone call had gone well. The person she contacted promised to help, but she didn't know how long it would take for them to arrive. Every second felt like an eternity. Lena's fingers tapped anxiously against the counter, her mind replaying every detail of the conversation she had overheard. Elias was cunning, yes, but now he had underestimated someone he never even considered important. The truth was out there, and she was the one holding it. The thought of the deal being signed in just minutes made her stomach turn. What if she hadn't overheard that one critical word? Offshore? What if she hadn't put the pieces together? She wouldn't allow herself to think about it. She had to focus. Elias Youssef had built an empire by being ruthless, by playing the game in ways most people could never imagine. He thought he could pull off this deal without anyone noticing, without anyone questioning his methods. But Lena had noticed, and now, everything was about to change. She glanced at the hallway that led to the dining room. Elias's table was just beyond the corner. She could see him in her mind's eye, leaning back in his chair, confident, with that smirk on his face. He had no idea that the very people he thought were his pawns were the ones who would bring him down. Lena's phone buzzed again, the vibration cutting through the tension in the air. She quickly grabbed it from her pocket, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the message. "I'm on my way. Hold tight." She breathed a sigh of relief. The cavalry was coming. But the next question was, what would she do when they got here? How could she expose everything without putting herself in more danger? Elias had power. He had connections, money, and influence. He could make her life miserable if he found out she had uncovered his trap. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. She wasn't afraid anymore. She had worked too hard to stay invisible, to let people walk over her, to let the world ignore her. This was her moment, and she wasn't going to let it slip away. Lena stepped out of the back office and into the hallway, her steps deliberate as she approached the kitchen. The restaurant was closing for the night, but there were still a few guests lingering in the dining area, enjoying their drinks. She didn't make eye contact with anyone. Her focus was on the task at hand. When she reached the kitchen door, she paused, her hand resting on the cool metal. She needed a plan. There was no time to waste. If she could just get the evidence into the hands of someone who could do something about it, she'd be free. She could finally be rid of the weight that had been pressing on her for so long. She wasn't sure how she was going to do it, but she knew she had to act fast. She turned and moved toward the back exit. Just as she stepped outside into the cool New York night, she spotted a figure in the distance. Her contact had arrived. She walked quickly toward them, trying to stay calm, though her pulse quickened at the sight of someone she barely knew, someone who might be able to change everything. The figure stepped out of the shadows, a tall man in a suit. "You got it?" he asked quietly, his eyes scanning the street behind them. Lena nodded, her voice low. "I have everything, but you have to make sure it gets to the right people. Elias Youssef can't get away with this." He took the folder she handed him, his fingers brushing against hers for just a moment. "Don't worry," he said, his tone reassuring. "It's going to the authorities. This won't end well for him." Lena felt a small weight lift off her chest, but her heart was still pounding in her ears. The hardest part was done, but she knew this was only the beginning. Elias Youssef had a long list of enemies, and now, Lena was one of them. She had no idea what the fallout would be, but she wasn't backing down. Not now. Not when the truth was finally in the open. She turned and began to walk away, the rain from earlier still dripping from the streets, but now she felt lighter. The storm was over, and Elias Youssef's world was about to come crashing down. The next morning, the air in New York City felt different. The storm that had battered the streets the night before had passed, but the calm that followed was far from peaceful. Lena couldn't shake the feeling of urgency, her heart still pounding from the events of the night before. She hadn't heard from her contact yet, but she knew the wheels of change had started to turn. Elias Youssef's world was on the verge of unraveling, and Lena had a front row seat. She tried to push the anxiety down as she made her way through the bustling streets to her apartment. The sun was breaking through the clouds, but it did little to warm the chill in her bones. The silence of the city seemed louder than ever. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her from her thoughts. She pulled it out quickly, hoping it was the call she had been waiting for. It wasn't. It was a text message from her manager at the restaurant. "Where are you? You're late for your shift. Get here now." Lena stared at the message for a moment, her fingers trembling slightly. She hadn't even thought about work. She wasn't sure if she could go back to that place. How could she face the people who had no idea what she had just set in motion? She knew she couldn't stay away for long, though. Her life was already in motion, and she couldn't afford to stop now. She had to stay focused. She had to finish what she had started. Lena sighed, stuffing the phone back into her pocket. The restaurant was a familiar world, but it felt like a distant one now. She knew Elias and his associates were still in the dark about what had happened. They were all playing a game, thinking. They had control, but they didn't know that Lena had the key to their undoing. She didn't know how long she had before Elias started looking for the leak. She had no time to waste. Her shift was long, but she needed to keep her head low for now. The restaurant was almost empty as she arrived. The dinner rush had already passed, and there were only a few lingering customers left. Derek, the manager, gave her a pointed look as she walked through the door, but said nothing. Lena slipped into the back without making eye contact, her thoughts still racing. The kitchen was bustling with the last orders of the evening. Lena grabbed her apron and moved quickly to start her shift, but her mind wasn't on the food or the drinks she was carrying. She kept thinking about the information she had given her contact, about the file that could bring Elias Youssef down. Her pulse quickened as she imagined what could happen if the wrong people got their hands on it. What if they didn't do anything with the evidence? What if Elias somehow managed to cover it all up? She pushed the thoughts aside. She had to stay focused. She had done her part. Now, she had to trust that the right people would handle the rest. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a call. Lena answered it quickly, her heart in her throat. Hello. Her voice was steady, but inside, she was bracing herself. Lena, it's done. The authorities have the information. Elias Youssef's deal is being investigated. You did good. Relief washed over her, but it was quickly replaced by a new sense of urgency. What happens next? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The investigation will take time, but we've got eyes on him now. He won't be able to get away with this. Lena felt the weight of the words sink in. She had done it. She had exposed him. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. She hung up the phone, standing still for a moment as the reality of it all settled in. She had brought down a billionaire. She had done what most people would have been too afraid to do. She had taken a stand. The shift felt like it would never end. The hours dragged on, and Lena moved through the motions, her body going through the familiar tasks while her mind stayed with the events unfolding outside the restaurant. She knew she couldn't let her guard down. Elias might not be done yet, but for now, she allowed herself to breathe. The truth was out there, and there was no going back. She had started something, and now it was up to the world to see it through. The days that followed felt like a blur to Lena. Each morning, she would wake up to the same New York City skyline, but everything had changed. The moment she had exposed Elias Youssef's scheme, she knew it would never be business as usual for her again. The authorities had started their investigation into the $500 million deal, and Elias was no longer the untouchable billionaire he had been just days ago. She could feel the weight of it, the power shift, but it didn't make her feel invincible. It made her feel something else entirely, vulnerable. The truth was out there, but the fallout wasn't over. Lena couldn't shake the thought that Elias would come after her, that he would find some way to make her pay for what she'd done. That thought gnawed at her as she walked through the familiar streets, but she pushed it aside. For now, she had to focus on keeping her life intact. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from her contact. You're safe for now, but don't let your guard down. Elias is scrambling, but he's not done yet. Lena's heart skipped a beat. The storm was far from over. She knew Elias would try to make a comeback, to twist the narrative in his favor. But there was one thing she knew for sure. He had underestimated her. He had thought she was just a waitress, just a small cog in a much larger machine. But Lena had proved that sometimes the smallest voice could bring down the biggest empires. That afternoon, as Lena sat at her small kitchen table, her mind kept replaying the phone call from her contact. She had done her part, but now, it felt like she was stuck in a waiting game. Every minute that passed made her wonder what was coming next. What would Elias do when he realized he couldn't erase what she had exposed? Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a call. She took a deep breath and answered it, her fingers trembling as she held the phone to her ear. Lena, it's done, the voice on the other end said. The investigation is in full swing. Elias Youssef is under the microscope now, and we have people working on it from all angles. Lena felt a small sense of relief wash over her. What happens next? she asked, her voice tight. It's going to take time, but we're moving fast. He won't be able to hide from this. He's losing his grip. Lena leaned back in her chair, trying to process what she was hearing. This was it. Elias was going down. She had exposed him for who he truly was, and there was no going back. What about me? She asked. What happens to me? There was a pause on the other end of the line before the voice responded. Stay low. We've got your back. Just don't make any moves on your own. You're safe for now, but don't trust anyone outside of this circle. Lena nodded, though she knew the person couldn't see her. I understand. As she hung up the phone, Lena let out a slow breath. She knew the investigation was just beginning, but she couldn't help feeling a sense of finality in the air. Elias Youssef's days of playing people like pawns were over. But what about her? What about the people she worked with every day? The ones who were still oblivious to everything that had been going on? What would happen when they found out the truth? The truth that she, a simple waitress, had taken down one of the most powerful men in the city? Lena pushed those thoughts aside for now. She had done what needed to be done, and she had to trust that the right people would handle the rest. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about the justice that needed to be served. But as the days turned into weeks, Lena couldn't help but feel the tension in the air. The calm before the storm. Elias wasn't just going to walk away from this quietly. He would come for her. He would make her regret ever crossing him. And when that time came, Lena was going to be ready. The days after the phone call seemed to drag on for Lena. The investigation into Elias Youssef was underway, but nothing in her life felt settled. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart raced. Every knock on her apartment door made her tense. Her mind kept replaying the worst-case scenarios. What if Elias found out where she was? What if he retaliated in a way she couldn't predict? She had already exposed him, but the aftermath was just beginning. One morning, a knock on her door broke the silence of her small apartment. Lena froze. She wasn't expecting anyone. Hesitantly, she walked to the door and peered through the peephole. It was her contact, the person she'd trusted to get the evidence into the right hands. She opened the door slowly, her eyes scanning the street outside before letting them inside. You're safe for now, the man said, looking over his shoulder as if checking for someone following him. He stepped into the apartment, his voice low. But you need to know, Elias isn't taking this lying down. He's making moves. Big ones. Lena's stomach dropped. What kind of moves? She asked, trying to stay calm. He's shifting focus to damage control, trying to clean up the mess you made. But he's also been putting pressure on certain people, and it's only a matter of time before he comes for you. He replied, his eyes narrowing with concern. Lena felt a chill spread through her. She had been waiting for this, but now that it was here, it felt different. It was no longer just about exposing the truth. It was about surviving the storm Elias was about to unleash. What do I do now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man paused for a moment, glancing around the apartment before speaking again. Stay out of the spotlight. Keep a low profile. Don't trust anyone who doesn't already have your back. Elias has a way of turning people to his side. Lena nodded, though the words felt like a heavy weight on her chest. She had never been one to run or hide, but now she realized she had no other choice. What happens to Elias? She asked, her mind still reeling from everything that had happened. The investigation is still active, the man said. But he's a slippery one. He's not done yet. You've thrown a wrench in his plans, but he's going to fight back. And when he does, you need to be ready. Ready for what? Lena asked, already knowing the answer. Everything, he said, his voice grim. Elias won't go down without a fight. But if you can stay out of his sight for now, you'll have time. Time for the authorities to build their case. Time for people to see him for who he really is. Lena absorbed the information, her mind processing the weight of it all. She had done her part, but the real battle was just beginning. Elias had already lost the first round, but the game wasn't over. There was too much at stake. Too many people in his corner. The next few weeks felt like a fog of uncertainty. Lena kept her head down, sticking to her routine, trying not to draw attention. She knew Elias would be watching, waiting for an opening. She could feel the tension in the air, but she also knew she had made the right choice. The truth was out there, and no matter how hard Elias tried to spin the narrative, he couldn't change the fact that she had exposed him. But as the investigation moved forward, it became clear that Elias was preparing for something much bigger than anyone had anticipated. His resources were vast, his reach far, and his will to maintain control unshakable. It was a war now, a battle of wills, and Lena had become a target in a game much larger than she had ever imagined. But she wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not after everything she had risked. As the weeks passed, Lena found herself growing more resilient, more determined. Elias Youssef might have power, but she had the truth. And that was something he couldn't take away from her. The days continued to pass slowly for Lena. Despite the relief she felt from the call confirming that Elias Youssef's downfall was set in motion, the reality of her situation weighed heavily on her. It wasn't just about exposing a billionaire anymore. It was about keeping herself safe in a world where the powerful played by their own rules. The thought of Elias retaliating was never far from her mind. She had seen what men like him were capable of when they felt threatened, and he would stop at nothing to protect his empire. Lena had done everything she could to ensure the truth came to light, but now the pieces were out of her hands. What came next was a game she wasn't entirely prepared for. One evening, as Lena was leaving work, she spotted a black SUV parked across the street from the restaurant. The vehicle's tinted windows made it difficult to see who was inside, but Lena's instincts kicked in. She had seen this before. The way the car was always parked just out of sight, as if waiting for her to make a move. She glanced over her shoulder, her heart pounding as she tried to make sense of the situation. Was Elias making his move? Was it happening now? Lena quickly ducked into an alleyway, hoping to avoid being noticed. Her mind raced as she kept moving, not daring to look back. The SUV remained in her peripheral vision, but she didn't slow down. When she reached the end of the alley, she turned the corner and immediately felt the weight of the situation. She had no idea who was watching her or how much Elias had found out. The feeling of being hunted was suffocating, but she knew she couldn't let it stop her. Lena couldn't afford to freeze now. If she did, everything she had fought for, the truth, the evidence, the power to bring Elias down, would be for nothing. As she continued to walk, her phone buzzed again. She pulled it out cautiously, only to find a text message from her contact. Stay vigilant. Elias has mobilized his people. Keep your eyes open. The words hit her like a ton of bricks. Elias was making moves. He was getting desperate. Lena's fingers tightened around the phone as she processed the message. This was exactly what she had feared. The danger wasn't just about the investigation anymore. It was about her being caught in the crossfire. The next few days felt like a blur of uncertainty and tension. She kept her head down, avoided unnecessary interactions, and made sure to cover her tracks. Every time she stepped outside, her eyes constantly scanned the crowd, looking for anyone who might be following her. But the worst part was the waiting. The waiting for something to happen, the waiting for Elias to make his next move. And then, one night, it happened. Lena was walking home from work when she heard the sound of footsteps behind her. They were fast, deliberate, not the kind of steps that belonged to a casual passerby. She quickened her pace, but the footsteps didn't stop. Her heart began to race as she glanced over her shoulder, and she saw him. A man, tall and wearing a dark coat, was following her at a distance. Lena felt a jolt of panic. Was this it? Was this the moment Elias had sent someone to silence her? She turned the corner and ducked into a nearby convenience store, hoping to blend in with the crowd. The man followed, but as he entered, Lena disappeared into the aisles. She held her breath, listening intently for any sign that he was still nearby. After what felt like an eternity, she peeked around the corner and saw the man leaving the store. He hadn't seen her. She exhaled, her body shaking with the adrenaline rush. For a moment, it felt like everything had caught up with her, like Elias's reach had finally extended to her. But she couldn't afford to let fear take hold. She had a job to do, and she couldn't let this intimidate her. Lena spent the next few days being even more careful. She stayed in public spaces, always alert, always on edge. Her contact had been right. Elias was making moves, but she wasn't about to back down. If anything, the encounter only strengthened her resolve. She knew she had to stay strong. As the investigation into Elias continued to unfold, it became clear that there was no turning back. The trap had been set, and Lena was no longer just a bystander. She was a key player in a game that had far-reaching consequences. And now, it was her turn to take the next step. The storm was coming, but Lena was ready. The tension that had been building over the past weeks finally reached its peak. Lena knew that Elias Youssef wouldn't let his empire crumble so easily. His resources, his connections, and his unyielding will meant he was capable of fighting back in ways no one could anticipate. And yet, Lena stood resolute. Every night, she went to bed with the weight of what she had exposed hanging over her, but with each passing day, her resolve grew stronger. The phone call came one evening while she was walking home from her shift at the restaurant. It was from her contact, the person who had helped her expose Elias's illegal dealings. Lena, the voice on the other end, said, "We've got a problem." Lena's heart skipped a beat. "What's happened?" "It's Elias. He's been working behind the scenes to destroy the evidence. He's trying to frame someone else, someone close to the investigation. He's not done with you yet." Lena felt a cold chill run down her spine. She had known this moment would come, but hearing it aloud made it all too real. Elias had been planning for this, using his power, his wealth, and his influence to rewrite the story. He wasn't going to go down without a fight. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice steady despite the panic rising inside her. "Stay hidden," the contact said. "We're doing everything we can to keep the investigation moving forward. But you need to be careful. Elias has a way of making things disappear. People disappear." The words were a warning, and they hit hard. Lena had expected some form of retaliation, but this was different. Elias wasn't just protecting his business interests anymore. He was protecting his freedom, and he would stop at nothing to keep himself from going down. Lena's mind raced as she hung up the phone. She had known Elias would fight back, but now it felt personal. She wasn't just a whistleblower anymore. She was a target. The city that had once felt like a safe place to live now felt full of shadows. As she walked home, every rustle of leaves, every passing car, every unfamiliar face seemed to carry a hidden threat. Elias's reach was vast. He had people everywhere, and that thought was enough to make Lena's stomach twist. But she couldn't afford to be afraid. She had already made the decision to stand up for what was right, and she couldn't back down now. The next few days were a blur of constant vigilance. Lena stayed in public places, always aware of who was around her, always watching her back. She couldn't let Elias's threats push her into hiding. She had to keep moving forward. She couldn't stop until the truth was fully exposed, until the authorities had enough to bring him down. And then, on a cold Wednesday evening, she received a call that would change everything. It was the investigator leading the case against Elias. "Lena, we have everything we need," he said, his voice filled with urgency. "The evidence is solid. Elias is finished. We're going to make the arrest." Lena's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond. It felt like the world had shifted in an instant, and the weight of what she had done, the risk, the fear, the isolation, finally felt like it had purpose. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and hope. "We've got him. You're safe now," the investigator confirmed. "But we need you to stay in a safe place until everything's final. Elias has people who are loyal to him. It's not over yet." Lena felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she knew it wasn't over. Elias was being cornered, but he was still dangerous. The investigation had taken months of careful planning, of moving in silence, of gathering the pieces one by one. Now, at last, it was all coming together. She had exposed him, and now the world would know the truth. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was the woman who took down a billionaire. The storm wasn't over yet, but the end was in sight. Lena could finally allow herself a moment of peace. She had done it. Elias Youssef's world was about to come crashing down, and she had played the role of the catalyst. The fight had been long, but the victory was coming, and she was ready. The moment Elias Youssef was arrested felt like a surreal dream. Lena sat quietly in her apartment, staring out the window at the bustling city below. New York had always been her home, but now it felt like a world apart. The streets were the same, but everything had changed. Elias, the man who had built an empire from nothing, was now behind bars, his world crumbling. It wasn't just the arrest itself, it was what it represented. The truth had come out. The injustice had been exposed, and for once, the little guy had won. The authorities had enough evidence to convict Elias on multiple charges, including money laundering and fraud. The media had picked up the story, and soon the world knew what Lena had known all along. She had faced down the power of a billionaire and come out victorious. The press coverage was relentless. Headlines read, "Like something from a movie, Billionaire CEO arrested for multi-million-dollar fraud, exposed by Waitress, and Lena's name was now everywhere. She had become the symbol of courage, of standing up for what was right, even when the odds were stacked against her. But it wasn't the media attention that mattered. It was the message that came with it. Lena had never wanted fame. She hadn't set out to bring down a billionaire. All she had wanted was to do the right thing, to expose the truth, and to make sure that people like Youssef couldn't keep getting away with things that weren't right. Now, as the dust settled and the case moved through the courts, Lena's life started to slowly return to some semblance of normalcy. The fear that had haunted her for weeks began to fade. She had lived through the worst of it, hiding, waiting, wondering if she had done the right thing. And now, with Elias facing charges and his empire dismantling, she finally felt like she could breathe again. But the changes in her life weren't all easy. People in her community had started to look at her differently. Some were supportive, proud of her courage. But others, the ones who had always seen her as just another waitress, couldn't understand how someone like her, someone with so little power, could bring down someone so powerful. It didn't make sense to them. To them, she was still the waitress, the woman who served drinks, the person who faded into the background. But Lena knew the truth. She knew that the people who mattered, those who stood by her when it counted, were the ones who saw her for who she really was. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a person who knew the value of truth, of standing up when no one else would. And now, with the case wrapping up and Youssef's empire in ruins, Lena could finally look forward to a new chapter. The road had been long and difficult, but she had made it. She had faced the darkest parts of herself and emerged stronger, more determined than ever. The truth had won, and so had she. Lena wasn't sure what her future held, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to fade into the background again. She had proven that even the smallest voice could change the world. And that was the greatest victory of all. In this gripping tale of power, truth, and resilience, Lena, a black waitress, uncovers a shocking conspiracy involving a billionaire CEO and a $500 million deal. As she bravely exposes his illicit actions, Lena takes center stage in one of the most intense black stories ever told. The narrative unfolds as Lena, once overlooked and underestimated, stands up to powerful forces and risks everything to bring the truth to light. This black story is a journey through courage, where a seemingly ordinary woman defies the odds and brings down a man who thought he was untouchable. As the story reaches its climax, Lena's fight for justice becomes a symbol of the strength found in black stories, proving that even the smallest voices can make a monumental impact. With each turn, Lena's determination to expose corruption, survive retaliation, and seek justice captures the essence of what it means to rise above adversity. This black story will leave you inspired, questioning the true power of the individual and rethinking what it means to fight for what's right. Join us as we unravel this unforgettable black story, where one woman's courage brings a billionaire to his knees, and the truth prevails against all odds.